Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
The story is told that in the beginning, there were two gods who were brothers. And like many brothers, they struggled with each other for power and status. One brother was the king of the forces of life, light, and warmth. He wore a crown made of green oak branches and brought with him all growth and vitality, fertility, and abundance. He was called the Oak King. His brother was the king of the forces of death, cold, and darkness. He wore a crown made of the prickly holly branches and brought with him all withering and decay, stillness, and hibernation. He was called the Holly King. The brothers were identical in strength, and so year after year, the same pattern was repeated. Each year, the Oak King would grow strong and mighty, and during his time of dominance, the light would gradually increase, bringing with it warmth and abundance. But each year, at the height of his power, he would be thrown down by the Holly King. In the wake of the Holly King's victory, the light would gradually wane, and as it did, cold would come, and the land would go dormant. But at the height of the Holly King's power, he would be challenged again by the Oak King and would fall. And the cycle would repeat again and again and again. Alone, the brothers were equals. But soon there came a race of beings known as humans. The people watched this cycle, and pretty soon they began to take a side. The people loved light and warmth, and they feared darkness and cold. And so each year, they would celebrate the victory of the Oak King, but they would mourn the victory of the Holly King. When the two struggled with each other, the people would lend the strength of their voices and their bodies, their minds and their spirits to the Oak King. But the Holly King was without their support. And so time went by. Over time, the people's adoration of warmth and light only grew. And so they began to invent ever new ways to find light in the darkness and warmth in the cold. And finally, if they wished it, they could spend all of their time in the light they had created, and they could be warm all year long. But their efforts to stay always in the light and the warmth were not without consequences. Generations passed, and generations again, and the people did not at first notice the shifts in the balance. But finally, they could ignore it no longer. The people began to notice that darkness was disappearing from the land, driven out by millions of lights the people had created. Animals, birds, plants, even people began to suffer the effects of light unbalanced by darkness. But it was not just darkness that was disappearing. Cold began to flee too. The whole world began to get warmer. Summer began sooner and lasted longer. Ice that had been frozen far longer than the longest memory of the oldest person in the land began to melt. Migrating birds and animals began to be confused about when to begin the migration. Plants found themselves rooted in climates that no longer supplied their needs. The air was changing, and the winds that had brought rain and taken it away again began to flow in unexpected directions, causing drought here and flood there. The people began to see that their support of warmth and light over cold and darkness had altered the balance of the world. They began slowly, one at a time, to realize that the Holly King was dying. And for the first time, this thought filled them with fear. What would happen if the balance continued to be destroyed? Could they even survive in a world without the Holly King? And in the world of the gods, the Oak King realized it too. And though they had been competitors all these many centuries, he also realized that he loved his brother deeply and could not live without him. The longest night came, and the Oak King and the Holly King met again. But this time, the Oak King had no heart for the fight. He laid down his sword and spear. He came open-handed to his brother, who was struggling just to stay on his feet. The Oak King wrapped the Holly King in a tight embrace, and he promised to set aside their enmity and to help his brother heal. On the night when he usually claimed ascendance, the Oak King realized that the world was already too warm and too light. And so he laid the great oak crown on the head of his brother, took his hand, and each supporting the other, they went out into the world to see what could be done to restore balance.
Good morning. Happy Hanukkah, solstice, and an early Merry Christmas. Reverend Pariso offered me the opportunity to talk about my personal perspective on the holiday season and give a short talk even tangentially related to Hanukkah. So today I'm kind of going with that tangential connection. Regarding Hanukkah, it's really about a group of Jewish zealots who rebelled against the Greeks and assimilationist Jews who adopted Greek ways. So they probably wouldn't be happy with me, a Jew, speaking in this congregation and being a member of a Unitarian church. But I like to think that God, if he, she, they exists, has a sense of humor. And if there's a place called heaven, I don't really think there's just one way to get in. What's been on my mind this holiday season and for much of the past 2 years since the start of the Israel-Hamas war has been figuring out my own Jewish journey. What faith in the traditional God of my youth, without faith in the traditional God of my youth, what my former housemates used to call Sky Daddy. And during this time of rising anti-Semitism, where just being openly Jewish feels like a political act, I've been struggling to find my place both in the world and within my small tribe. You see, I grew up in a Jewish world in a suburb called Beechwood, a small town east of Cleveland, more Jewish than Brookline. There's a running joke. Every Jewish holiday is a version of, they tried to kill us, God saved us, we survived, let's eat. But even as a boy, I questioned that history. I mean, where was God during the Holocaust? What about my cousins in Europe, several of whom survived, but carried scars both physically and emotionally from that horror, along with all the others who didn't make it? Though I was born just a decade after the Holocaust, it seemed in some ways like ancient history. I mean, to a child, anything that happens before he, she, they were born seems like ancient history, doesn't it? But I couldn't wait to get out into the real world, to leave the safe but insular community I was born into and meet folks from different backgrounds. Then I ended up in Knoxville, Tennessee for college. There, for the first time, I heard phrases like Jew somebody down, and that some man was, quote, a real Jew, though he probably wasn't, when a motel owner tried to rip another student off. But mostly, I had a free ride with my birth name, Bruce LeBlanc, and my generic American looks, red blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. I could pass for normal. But every so often, I get a reminder of my outsider status, even here in Massachusetts. I remember 20 years ago, I watched the legislature debate the wisdom, I use that in quotes, of putting same-sex marriage up for a vote after the Supreme Judicial Court legalized gay marriage in the state. As the session came to order, those of us in the gallery were told to stand while the chaplain of the House, who happened to be a Catholic priest, gave a prayer in the name of, quote, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It was clear back then that there was a state religion and that it was the Catholic Church. Just as it felt strange and wrong for a bunch of straight white men to decide whether I or we would have the right to marry, it felt wrong to have a Christian prayer to open the session in the State House. I felt invisible, voiceless. Fast forward to now, this year. When I visited my old temple back in Cleveland last spring, I was buzzed into the lobby where a stocky cop, gun on waistband, asked me my business. The rabbi, a young woman in her 30s, said that this, an armed guard at every temple, Jewish day school, and synagogue, is the norm in Jewish Cleveland and in many places around Boston. Today, I think of Sydney, the killing of people who are simply marking their holiday and living their culture. For some people on both the left and the right, Jews are associated, blamed, and sometimes targeted as agents of the current Israeli government. Most of my Jewish friends, like me, don't support Netanyahu any more than we support Trump. We believe both in the right of one Jewish state in the world to exist and the right of Palestinians to have a state of their own on the West Bank and Gaza. So here I am, kindling the lights of Hanukkah. In some ways, it feels like a political statement. But I'm proud of my culture, my history, and the tiny group of people that I come from. My hope, my prayer is that whatever holidays and traditions we celebrate this season, they bring peace, mutual respect, and light in the darkness. Thank you.
Today is the winter solstice. The longest night of the year is upon us. And tomorrow would be my grandmother's 98th birthday, if she were still alive. Our family likes to say that her birthday ushers in the light returning to the world. Her mother and family came from Ireland, where over 5,000 years ago, long before the Great Pyramids of Giza or Stonehenge were ever conceived, an ancient temple was erected to celebrate the winter solstice. It's called New Grange. New Grange is so precisely engineered that for 17 minutes on the morning of each winter solstice, which happened this morning, a roof box above the entrance allows sunlight to enter the temple and reach the innermost chambers, bringing bright sunlight to the darkest corners of the temple that are shrouded all year long. It's remarkable how humans have been tracking the movement of the sun and the stars for eons. Just a little over 2,000 years ago, 3 men saw a brilliant star appear in the night sky and decided to follow it. The star led them eastward until it stopped over the town of Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ was born. This is the story of the 3 wise men who, by many accounts, were trained astronomers. Now, to many, the idea of an intensely bright star appearing, moving, and stopping over a little ancient town might sound more story than history. But just this year, a NASA planetary scientist by the name of Mark Matney decided to pore over ancient astrological records to get a picture of what was happening in the night sky over Bethlehem. What he found, and published only 3 weeks ago at the beginning of this month, was a detailed historical account from China of a strange star that appeared in the night sky around the time of Jesus' birth, streaking eastward. And the star was reported to have glowed for more than 70 days straight. Now, Matney suspects that this was not a star, but most likely a long-period comet, one that could appear as moving before someone traveling from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and appear to suddenly stop overhead for about 2 hours. So, it turns out the biblical Star of Bethlehem may have actually been a celestial visitor, a beacon of light during some of the longest nights of the year. To me, New Grange and the Star of Bethlehem are reminders that in the darkest of days, we humans always look for the light. May we cherish and nurture this divine instinct of ours.
Love is the spirit of this congregation. May it carry us through the week ahead. For all of the time we are apart, may we know that the love that gave us birth is with us now and always. Go in peace to love and serve. The service begins when the service ends. Amen.
We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.